Okay, here we are. Now we're going to move along to Crabtree Farm, that absolutely gorgeous property that's just to the north of us. But this is going to be 2 episodes because there's quite a bit of history there. Welcome to View from the Bluff, a celebration of the history of Lake Bluff, Illinois. Your host is Kathy O'Hara, and I am Joanna Rolek. Episode 8, Crabtree Farm, Part 1, The Durands.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, so Crabtree Farm actually started as Judge Henry Blodgett's farm back in the 1880s, okay? It was called Ashland. It was a large dairy farm, and it produced milk. It was a whole area.
And excuse me just for a moment, and Blodgett runs along the southern perimeter of it.
That's right, and it's named for Judge Henry Blodgett, who knew Abraham Lincoln and all of that, was quite a political figure. But when he dies in the early 1900s, it will be sold to Scott Durand. Scott Durand was the Durands of Lake Forest and, the Durand Institute and all of that with the college and stuff. So a very well-known Lake Forest family, and Scott Durand was part of it. His wife was Grace Durand. And when they lived on Crabtree in Lake Forest, but there's a street off of Sheridan called Crabtree, which is still there. But she had a small dairy farm there. She fancied herself to be a dairy farmer. She wanted to study all of the latest scientific methods of how to produce the purest, best milk and all of that. So she had this little farm off of Crabtree, but it's right pretty much near neighbors. I mean, it was residential even in the early 1900s. So she's getting some grief.
And this is East Lake Forest that she's raising cows.
Right, in the early 1900s, yeah. So there was not, and chickens and everything else that goes along with that. So there was some unhappiness, shall we say, with that. In 1905, Scott Durand will purchase Ashland, Judge Blodgett's farm, and he will give it as a Christmas present to his wife, Grace. Scott Durand was a well-to-do, prosperous sugar merchant, which we'll find out a little bit later about how that works out. But they will move to Crabtree Farm, and she will set up a whole dairy operation there.
And what year is this?
This was 1905.
1905. Okay.
And she will undertake all sorts of studying on this. She became, actually, in the early days, a very, very well-known expert on dairy farms and this. She would give talks, she wrote pamphlets, she wrote booklets, everything else. They will inherit the farms that were there already when it was owned by Judge Blodgett. But in 1910, a fire erupts there, and all of the farm buildings are destroyed. So she will enlist the aid of architect Solomon Beeman. Solomon Beeman is well known for he did Pullman Village, down on the south side, which was George Pullman's little hobby for his employees and stuff. So he will build what we now know as you go by Crabtree Farm. Those buildings, those farm buildings, which form a U and everything else, were built by him, and they were built by him right about 1911.
Now, this is the same time that Great Lakes Naval Base is being...
Absolutely, 1911. So you've got that. You've also got to realize that Crabtree Farm today is one of the very few surviving what they call gentleman farms. Because people who had these farms, for large farms, the Armours and the Swift, had that. The Armours down, you can think of Elwha. They were gentleman farms, because that was not done for their sole subsistence as income. Occupations. It wasn't. They just did that. They had it. They lived there.
Yeah.
They were doing that. So this was the Durand's farm, Crabtree Farm, which was a gentlewoman farm because she owned it.
Yeah.
So they rebuilt it.
But they both lived there, correct?
Oh, yes. They both lived there.
But it was hers.
It was hers. It was definitely hers. And they had the farmhouse in the front, which was nice, but it wasn't a grand house or anything like that.
So it wasn't what there is now. Is that right?
It's actually similar, but about 20 years ago, it was a fire, and it has been rebuilt.
I see.
But it wasn't what you call a huge home. It was pretty modest for the time, but that's where they lived. In 1915, there is in the county a huge anthrax scare. Anthrax is a disease that hoof and mouth type of thing that affects cows. And so the remedy was, we must destroy all the cows. Okay, so they come to her farm, and the sheriff says, you know, you could get anthrax. We got to save the county, blah, blah, blah. You're ordered to destroy your herd. Now, she had a very prime herd. She was selling milk. She had her whole prosperous business and all of this, and she was told to destroy her cows. Now, Grace Durand just did not have a dairy farm. She loved her cows. Okay? She had an orchestra come to play to her cows to soothe them because they would produce better milk. Music was a part of love. It was a part of the repertoire of feeding and taking care of the cows. She was unhappy, so she barricades Crabtree Farm. She sets up a thing, and she stands out there. She's got her shotgun, and she defies and tells the sheriff's men, the deputies, no, you can't come on the property. So there was a standoff. This is 1915. Unfortunately, she's going to lose the stand. I mean, it was all over the papers, everything else. Here's society woman, everything, which she was. She was quite the society woman also. So, but you're going to have to. So, unfortunately, she had to give in, and the herd was destroyed. Sadly enough, they didn't have anthrax. It was all done for nothing with her herd. So she did rebuild the herd, and it was still a success. Now, she was just an interesting woman, Grace Durand. Right around that same time, around 1915 or so, she disappears for a week. Nobody could find her anywhere. I mean, it was hit the papers, everything, because she was a society woman. Or it happened to her. Later on, that she'll be found after about a week or two. Rather mysterious. Nobody knows exactly what happened or anything else. Kind of covered over, and she comes back home, and everything in life goes on. But she really was an interesting woman. She also believed in spirits. She believed in having seances, which she did at her place, because she would call upon the spirits, and they would talk to her. She talked to Joan of Arc, okay, and Abraham Lincoln, among many others.
Yes.
That she brought up with her seances, and she would invite people to them. It's 1917, it's World War I. She said, I really need to talk to President Wilson because I need to tell him about how to run the war, because I've been given some advice from Abraham Lincoln and Joan of Arc how to run the war. She was serious. And she believed in the afterlife. She believed in this. She wrote a couple of pamphlets. So she's an interesting person. So after World War I in the 1920s, the Durands decided that they were going to maybe sell off some of their property. In 1925, they did sell off a few acres along the lake to William McCormick Blair, okay? And he will hire the architect David Adler to build their house, which is I've been through it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Every room faces the lake, and has a view on it. And they collected early American furniture. So this was their summer home and everything else that the Blairs had. But the Durands still had the front part. They still had their farm and all of that. They were going on. But they decide maybe sell some of it off. So in the mid-1920s, they come up with a plan to make 150 housing lots on Crabtree Farm, which they would sell off personally, and they would have to approve each house before it was built.
Now, this isn't the Blairs. This is the Durands.
This is right.
The Durands. Okay.
The Blairs had their own little section over there, but the rest of the property were the Durands, and they were looking, maybe we should sell off more, but we'll have it under how we want. We're going to sell off these lots. Houses are going to be $150,000. This is in the 20s. That's a lot of money. Okay, and they were going to have to approve each house. Nothing happens. It never, but we do have the maps for it. It's an interesting thing. The other thing they were going to build was a casino on the lakefront. All right, now this becomes interesting on the casino part of it. Because a casino, as we know, which is gambling and things like that, back in the 20s and stuff was basically like a huge dance hall, okay? And it was going to be on the lake, and there were going to be a harbor built, and it had a thing, and they were going to be boats that would come up from Chicago, drop people off. Now, just for dancing really wasn't going to sell it. We have an idea that there was also probably gambling and everything else to happen. Now, this is the 20s. And gambling in the Chicagoland area was pretty much controlled by the gangs, primarily the Capone gang and the Bugs Moran gang. So we're thinking, was there, some kind of a thing there? Was there a kind of relationship? Remembering that Scott Durand was a sugar broker. Okay, so sugar is a major component of making alcohol.
Oh,
okay. So it never happened, but really, why would you have this? What was the point of this casino? Okay, so that became a little murky and a little questionable. And then in 1932, Scott Durand is indicted. So here it is, the society figure, Crabtree Farms, is indicted for making sugar and selling to the Capone gang. Among these 79 are several Capone gang members also, instrumental in helping them produce illegal alcohol. Very scandalous.
So Kathy, basically on one of our earlier episodes, you talked about liquor coming in off of the lake and being brought in by Capone or Capone's group at the time was the thought. And was Crabtree the site where this might have landed?
It could have been. Okay. It would have been a prime spot because most of it was pretty barren. It was not being utilized except for a small portion on the south end with the Blairs, but the rest of it was open. It would have been very easy to land a boat and bring it up and then to take the road out from Crabtree into Sheridan Road, which is the great thoroughfare from Lake County down to Chicago. And that's through the 20s was huge. About 20 years ago in an article, the state's attorney for Lake County had said, well, everybody knew that all of this liquor was being stored in barns around Lake Bluff.
Oh, wow.
So, the odds are, was it there? Yeah, it could have. Was it at the Lake Bluff beach? Even possible there. But definitely, probably things were happening.
And this is just at the time and in the similar location as the Women's Christian Temperance Union.
Oh, yeah, because Grace was president of the Women's Christian Temperance Union in Lake Bluff.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know how she kind of worked with that when her husband was indicted, but she was.
Well,
they were an interesting couple.
I guess they must have been.
Yeah.
Fascinating. We're at 1932 now.
32. But 1933 comes along and you have a new president. FDR, this is the election of 1932, who also ran on the thing of getting rid of the 18th Amendment. So in 1933, the 21st Amendment is passed, which gets rid of the 18th Amendment, which now makes alcohol sale and everything else legal. So by the fact that he had been indicted, but the trial hadn't happened, so it all just went away. So there never was the trial. But he was sort of tainted with the idea, well, was he involved with what was going on with the whole thing of the 1920s and Prohibition and everything else. They will continue to live on the thing, and they will both die in the late 1940s. And they pretty much stayed out of trouble, or rather out of the news into that. But they were very interesting people.
Wow.
Okay. In the late 1940s, in fact, Grace actually dies in 1949, the Durands, lived out their life pretty quietly at the end.
You mean after all the scandals?
After all the scandals and the different things, and no more seances, and the spirits seemed to have gone away, and all of that. But as we go into the next part 2 of Crabtree Farms, which is The Bad Boy and Other Misdeeds, which will be talking about what had happened, basically, their son Jack Durand, who was an interesting kid, and what happens during his sort of stay at Crabtree.
Well, this should be interesting. Thanks,
Oh, it
Kathy.
is.
So we'll look for that one the next time.
Yes, we will talk about, Bad Boy Jack and Other Misdeeds.
Love it. We're back at Crabtree Farm next time. Please subscribe so that you get notified when we have another episode ready to roll. We've got quite a few chapters of Lake Bluff history for you. Thanks so much for joining us. And a big thank you to our producer, Bruce Himmelblau, to Terry Moran, who provided the music, The Shores of Lake Michigan, used by permission from the album Lost Coast Safe Harbor, recorded and co-produced by Danny McMurray of Diameter Music here in Lake Bluff, and also our music supervisor, Fred Cook. And very special thanks to the staff of the Lake Bluff History Museum, Nancy Leone, Lindy Jensen, Pam Russell, and Adrian Fawcett. And please remember that for more information, including wonderfully engaging displays that feature so much of what was talked about in these episodes, please be sure to visit the Lake Bluff History Museum or stop by the website, which is at lakebluffhistory.org. Thank you.